Morning.
Morning, good evening.
Good evening to you. Good morning for me. How are you?
I'm fine. Very good.
Good.
Hi, Katia.
What
Nice to
what
meet
time
you.
is it where what time is it for you?
It's 7 p.m.
Okay, it's 10 a.m. here, so it's early in the day for us.
Uh, okay, thank you so much for finding time for this conversation. Very nice to meet you, really.
Yes,
First,
it's very nice to meet you as well.
yeah, first of all, I want to say that your story is very important for many people with type 1 diabetes and for many parents. We are based in Dubai, but our Sugar Pulse community includes people from many countries. A lot of them are parents of children with type 1 diabetes. And for them, your story isn't just medical news, it's a hope. It's a real hope. So, my English is not perfect, so I may speak a little slowly, but I understand main idea. Okay, we are recording this conversation so we can later translate it and share with our community. And maybe we can start with your story. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your life before type 1 diabetes become such a big part of your life?
Sure. Well, my name is Katie Beth Hand, and I live here in Arkansas in the southern part of the United States. And we have no family history of autoimmune disease or of type 1 diabetes. And I was young and busy traveling the world and just living life. And then at age 26, I actually ended up being diagnosed with type 1. I had just finished up a 10-day international trip. I came home thinking I had the flu, went to the doctor and was actually misdiagnosed with type 2 because of my age, and then went into DKA, ended up at the hospital, and that's when I was actually diagnosed with type 1, was at age 26.
It's a pity that it's often the usual story. People um, knows about their diagnosis, type 1 diabetes. And Katie, what was the hardest part of living with type 1 diabetes for you, physically, emotionally, or mentally?
Yes, so I lived with type 1 for the past 13 years and struggled with it on a daily basis, like a lot of us do. Obviously, struggling with highs, getting used to figuring out how to eat to keep my blood sugar from spiking, how to dose for certain foods. And then the real struggle for me was going low. I struggled really terribly with really low lows and hypoglycemia unawareness. So sometimes I would be really low and not realize that I was dangerously low. So I ended up getting a CGM to constantly let me know what my blood sugar was and have worn that every day for the past 13 years, being awake at night, getting woken up because my blood sugar is high or low. Where we live here in the States, it's beautiful here. And so I'm married, we have 4 children, and we like to go hiking and ride bikes and go swimming and all of these things. And it was a constant struggle with, do I have all of my diabetes supplies with me? Do I have enough snacks if I go low? That constant fear of what happens if someone isn't around and I go low. Or I think the hardest fear for me was honestly that fear of being in charge of my children out hiking or driving a car and having a low that puts us all in danger. So those were the daily fears that I lived with for a very long time.
Yes, hyperglycemia is often the biggest fear of the parents of the children with type 1 diabetes. And Katie, uh, what you can say about what gave you hope in those days?
Those days, my hope was kind of constantly in better technology, getting better at this. Sometimes my A1C usually ran actually a little bit high because I lived in constant fear of going low. And so then I had to balance that with that fear of letting it run high long term and what complications that would cause. But, I lived with we all live with the dream of maybe a cure will come. I wasn't sold that that would happen in my lifetime. I certainly did not think that would happen to me. And so I just lived with the hope that things would turn out okay, that we would get better advancements in technology. And that was it. I did not have a lot of faith until just recently that a cure would really, really happen in my lifetime.
How did you first learn about this research program, treatment opportunity?
Yeah, I found out about the Eledon trial. I actually found it online. I'd had a really hard day, a hard night actually. I was up and down multiple times treating blood sugar. I went low and then I overtreated and I was high. And it was the back and forth that we all deal with. And so I got online and I thought there's got to be a better way. And I ended up looking for a couple of different things and ended up finding actually two clinical trials that run out of the University of Chicago here in the States. And so I applied online and then moved on with my life and really didn't think I might ever hear back from anyone. And then a week or so later, my phone rang and I started the process for going through everything to actually qualify for and get into the trial.
And was it a difficult decision? What helped you make the decision to participate?
I had done a lot of research on kind of what the risks of doing a trial like this were. And there are risks of being part of a clinical trial. Sometimes they don't work. Sometimes it can give you different health issues instead of type 1. And so it's something we had thought about a lot, very carefully, very prayerfully, considering whether this was the right choice or not. And the thing that finally convinced me to do it, once I really understood what the trial process would be like and had that information, I really wanted to do it. And then last May of 2025, I actually got to go to Chicago in person and spent a week there at the University of Chicago Medical Center doing testing for the trial. Number one, to make sure that I qualified, that I was healthy enough. And number two, creating a baseline of results to use for comparison in the trial. And when I got there, I actually met Dr. Wachowski and the research team. And that is what convinced me that I wanted to be part of this trial. These guys are not in it for money, they're not looking for fame. They all have a personal reason that they want a real cure for type 1. They are personally invested in this. And so once I met with them, I was dead set that I wanted to be part of the trial, and I just hoped and prayed that I would qualify for it.
And can you describe, if it's not NDA, the treatment process from your personal point of view? Uh,
Sure. Yeah, so like I said, in May, kind of the first step, I did a series of online and phone interviews. Then in May, I went and spent 5 days doing medical testing. Got the phone call about a month later after all my test results were back that I had qualified. And then I went back to University of Chicago for a week in October of last year. And that's the least fun part of the whole process. I stayed in the hospital for several days and got an IV infusion, three, in fact, of a medication. It is an immunosuppressant called thymoglobulin. It's not terrible, but you have to have that before you can go on the transplant list. And so I got that and it gave me, fever chills while I was in the hospital. Nothing terrible, just not a great time. So I did that in October and went on the transplant list a month later in November. And then I got the call the first week in January of this year, actually, and dropped everything. And my husband and I flew to Chicago to actually get my islet cell transplant. So the islet cell transplant is actually a really simple process. I was awake the whole time. When you hear transplant, you think like solid organ transplant, like this huge surgery, and that was not at all the case. I was awake the whole time. The doctor made made like a tiny pinpoint incision between my ribs and then snaked a tube into my liver, actually, not my pancreas. My islet cells live in my liver, and infused the islets into my liver. That's where they live and function, and then snaked the tube back out and gave me a Band-Aid. And that was the whole of the transplant process. It took about an hour for all of that, and then I went back up to my room. So that happened in January. And the islets kick in immediately. And so that was January 13th when I had my transplant. On January 20th, my numbers were so good that they took me off all basal insulin. And then over the course of the next couple of months, my insulin just decreased kind of day by day. And I have not had any insulin at all since March 3rd.
Great. And such question, maybe this prognosis, how long is this treatment? How long is for the time when you need to reload this transplanted cells?
What was the question?
Um, how long, maybe a doctor says about prognosis, how long time you can live with these transplanted cells and when you need to reload them.
Oh, yes. So the transplant hopefully will last the rest of my life. I
Yeah.
hopefully will not have to go back in and have another islet cell transplant. That's the goal of the trial medication that I'm on. It's called tegoprubart. It's an anti-CD40L, and I get it every 21 days through an IV in my arm. And that's what keeps my immune system from attacking those new islet cells. So islet cell transplants have existed for a long time, but there was a pretty big trade-off and not worth it to most people because you would have to go on some pretty high doses of traditional immunosuppressant medication, which can cause other issues, kidney issues, toxicity, eventually even toxicity to your islet cells. So islet cell transplants in the past, for many of them, they haven't lasted a lifetime because those immunosuppressant medications end up killing off the islets over time. So the goal with this trial is to be able to test this medication and prove that it does a good job of protecting the islets, which it does, and then also show that it can make a transplant last throughout the course of a person's lifetime. So the first patient has been completely off of insulin for 2 years. Her numbers are phenomenal. Her A1C is phenomenal. And that has been true for all of us. The other exciting part of this trial is that for all 12 of us, we've had kind of the same, it hasn't been some successes and some failures. We have all been able to very systematically be pulled off of insulin and be able to stay off of insulin.
That's very powerful. And what changed in your daily life after the treatment? What was the first moment when you felt something is really different now?
Lots of things have changed, a whole life change, and you understand that only if you live with type 1 or if you're a caregiver for someone with type 1. You know the constant impact that this disease has on your life. And so for me, it's impacted everything. I sleep through the night. I don't struggle with highs anymore. I also don't struggle with any of those lows anymore or that fear. When I leave the house now, I just take my phone and my car keys. I don't take a backpack of snacks and two kinds of insulin and an extra pump and a CGM and all of these different things. The real moment that the first time I thought, oh my gosh, this is big, was a couple of months after transplant. Everything had been going really well, but I was still wearing my CGM. The research team was still monitoring my blood sugar. And I had put on a CGM. It wasn't working right, like they sometimes don't. And so it was right before bed, and I got annoyed. And I just took the CGM off and threw it on the floor. And I was like, it's fine. I'll just put on a fresh one in the morning. So then I woke up the next morning and realized that was the first time in 13 years that I had not slept with the CGM on and that I had been able to go to bed knowing with full confidence that I would wake up and be just fine. So it wasn't one big moment of, wow, I don't have type 1. It has been a series of moments like that where I'm just living my daily life and then I look around and realize how different it really is.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And how did your family react to these changes?
My family loves it. My children have never known me without type 1. So, for the first time, we're getting to do a lot of these things where type 1 is not a factor. Now, type 1 never kept me from doing anything, but it just took a lot more planning. And sometimes we would have to stop and wait so that I could treat a low, things like that. And so, it's just not a factor in our lives anymore. So, my husband doesn't worry about me when he's not home. My kids don't have to stop their lives or help mom treat a low or go on another walk around the neighborhood because her blood sugar is high. Diabetes just doesn't play a role for us.
Great. Many people with type 1 diabetes are afraid to believe good news because they have hard promises for many years. What you can say to them?
Yeah, so I was the ultimate skeptic. Like I said, I really didn't think a cure would happen. I certainly didn't think it would happen for me. And so the exciting news is this trial is a massive step forward for our whole community. It is a massive breakthrough. There's really two pieces of curing type 1. One piece is this immunosuppression piece, which is what this trial is working on. It's that immunosuppression piece of how do we keep the immune system from attacking insulin producing cells. The other piece is how do we have enough, how do we replace those islet cells? So the islet cells that I got were cadaveric islet cells. And so the good news is those were great. The bad news is there's not enough of those for all of our community. So even if this treatment gets approved tomorrow, everyone can't run down the street and have an islet cell transplant yet because there's not enough for the millions of us living with type 1. So while this is a huge step forward, the other piece that we're still waiting on as a community is that scalability piece. Is it lab grown islets? Is it islets from pigs? There's a whole bunch of different science groups and different companies that are working on that issue of scalability. So as soon as we get that piece figured out, then, and I think that we're close to that. I think there are several companies that are right there doing it. The other trial that's running through University of Chicago, along with the Eledon trial that I'm in, is a trial that's actually testing out lab-grown islets. And so they are pulling patients off insulin as well with the lab-grown islets, but they're using traditional immunosuppression. So combining those two things, I think, is going to be the solution that ends up fixing all of us. So the good news is I think a cure is coming. The bad news is it's not tomorrow. And so for when I talk to kids and when I talk to parents raising kids with type 1, I just say the best thing that you can do is be hopeful and then just keep managing your diabetes as best as you can and stay really healthy. So when it's time to have a procedure like mine, you are ready to go.
Yes, really, a lot of people feeling really fear about when listen words immunosuppression, and in this way, tegoprubart is a real step to the future, is a real hope, and Illidan make a great job. So, Katie, please, if a parent of a child with type 1 diabetes is watching this interview and feeling tired, scared, or hopeless, what would you say to them?
I would say to keep taking really good care of your type 1, have grace with yourself, and realize that living with type 1 is difficult and no one ever gets it right all the time. And then also realize that there are a lot of different trials, and mine is only one of them that I'm in, but there are a lot of different trials that are really making huge breakthroughs. And I do think that we will see a cure for people in my generation and certainly for the children coming along behind us. I do not think that these kids will live with type 1 their entire lives. I wish it could be here tomorrow. It won't be. So take really good care of yourself and get ready, but there are brighter days ahead for all of us.
Yes, of course. Katie, thank you so much. I believe this conversation will mean a lot to many families. For our audience, your story is not only about science, it's about courage, patience, and hope. We're very grateful that you shared this with us. We'll translate the interview carefully and share it with our community. And I really hope we can stay in touch.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much.
All right. It was really nice to you. It was very nice to meet you. And if you have any other questions for me, you can feel free to reach out anytime.
Thank you, Katie. Your story gives many families hope.
Thank you so much. It was nice to meet you. Have a great rest of your evening, I guess.
Yeah.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.
Bye bye.